Hey class, welcome to chapter 3. This chapter is about energy systems and exercise. This is a really fun chapter. So in this chapter, we will talk about different energy systems. We have three different energy systems. We have more than this, but these are the main ones, the major energy systems. And we will talk about that. We will define them and explain them in detail. And then we will define some important terms. And also we will talk about the process of aerobic metabolism of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, uh, the concept of measuring fuel utilization with the respiratory exchange ratio, and we will describe the factors that affect the fuel utilization. We also talk about the response of oxygen consumption to steady state and submaximal exercise and explain the concept of maximal oxygen consumption. And we will discuss some supplements. So let's talk about the energy systems. First, we have to define these terms in order to talk about energy systems. So when we say metabolism, it consists of all of the chemical reactions that occur in the body. And metabolism can be anabolic reactions or catabolic reactions. And when we say anabolic reactions, it means a synthesis of molecules, like adding and combining two small molecules and create one big molecule. That's an anabolic reaction. On the other hand, we have catabolic reactions or catabolism, which is the breakdown of big and large molecules into small molecules. So, for instance, if I want to build glycogen, I have to add a couple of glucose molecules together, maybe hundreds of glucose molecules, and synthesize a glycogen. So that's an anabolic reaction. And if I want to break down glycogen and release glucose molecules into blood, that's a catabolic reactions because we are breaking down a large molecule, in this case, glycogen. Let's have a knowledge check. The reaction below is this picture. Is it a rephosphorylation of ATP from ADP, the hydrolysis of ATP from ADP, and inorganic reaction, the hydrolysis of ATP? That's correct. The D is the correct answer, the hydrolysis of ATP. Because we have ATPase and we discussed in previous chapter. So ATP is going to be broken down by ATPase to ADP and with an inorganic phosphate, and it releases energy. So this is the hydrolysis of ATP. So since this is breaking down, so this is a catabolic reaction. So in this figure and reaction at the bottom of the slide, we see an inorganic phosphate, PI, which is joined to adenosine diphosphate or ADP to reform or rephosphorylate ATP. And this is an anabolic reaction, right? Because we are building a molecule from small molecules. In this case, ADP and inorganic phosphate are joining together to create ATP, which is bigger than ADP and inorganic phosphate. So this is an anabolic reaction. And also, this is called rephosphorylation. This reaction requires energy, which is then stored as potential energy in the phosphate bonds of ATP. And the whole process is called rephosphorylation. So remember that this reaction is called rephosphorylation. And here, any failure to replenish ATP in the muscle may result in fatigue. And in rigor or rigorous like physical activity, we have a persistent contracted state which needs more ATP and more energy. And if we fail to replenish ATP in the muscle, we will get fatigue. So there should be some systems in the body, in the muscle, to replenish ATP as quickly as possible to prevent fatigue. So this is what we have. We have three energy systems. There are other, as I said, there are other energy systems, but these are the main ones. We have creatine phosphate, anaerobic glycolysis, and oxidative phosphorylation. These energy systems result in the synthesis of or phosphorylation of ATP. And each system has its advantages and disadvantages. Before talking about these energy systems, first let's talk about a cell. So we have two different types of cells on this slide. On the left hand, we have a normal animal cell. And as you can see, we have different sections and parts inside the cell. So we have cytoplasm, which is a like kind of a soup inside the cell. We have nucleus, which we have DNA in it. We have membrane of the cell. We have mitochondria, which are the powerhouses of a cell, and other organelles and other parts. So this is a normal and a regular animal cell. On the right hand, we have a muscle cell or a muscle fiber. So when we say muscle fiber, it means a muscle cell. But because they are very long, they are called fiber, muscle fiber. And just like a regular cell, we have nucleus, which has like DNA inside. We have mitochondria. But as you can see, in a regular cell, we have few mitochondria or mitochondrion. But in a muscle fiber, we have plenty of them because muscles are an active organ and they require more energy. And the mitochondria is the powerhouse of cells. So muscle fibers contain more uh, mitochondrion. So this is a picture of this, and these are all like proteins, and we need calcium to muscle contraction, so on and so forth. The energy systems that we are going to talk about, two of them, creatine phosphate and anaerobic glycolysis, these two energy systems occur in the cytoplasm. But the last one, the third one, oxidative phosphorylation, it takes place inside the mitochondria. So remember that that's a very important point. And here, this table shows the differences among the energy systems. So for the creatine phosphate, it's very fast. The amount of ATP replenished is very small. The duration of action is very short because it's very fast. The location is cytoplasm and the process is anaerobic. And recall from the previous chapter, when we say anaerobic, it means without oxygen. So for the creatine phosphate, we don't need oxygen. And for the anaerobic glycolysis, it's faster than creatine phosphate energy system. The amount of ATP replenished is small versus very small for creatine phosphate. The duration of action is short, and again, location is the cytoplasm of cells, and it's anaerobic. Again, without oxygen. It happens without oxygen. And the third one, the third energy system is oxidative phosphorylation. It's very slow. The speed of action is very slow. Therefore, the duration is very long. The amount of ATP replenished is large. A large amount of ATP replenished through oxidative phosphorylation. The location is mitochondria, and it is an aerobic process, which means we need oxygen for oxidative phosphorylation. Each energy system may be used under different exercise or activity conditions, and certain activities may require the use of the creatine phosphate system and so on and so forth. Like certain exercises, certain physical activities require the use of anaerobic glycolysis more than other two energy systems. This bullet point is very important. Um, all three energy systems are on all the time, but in certain conditions, one of the systems may be turned up more than the other two. It depends on the intensity and duration of the exercise activity, which we will talk about that later in this chapter. So it's very crucial to note and keep it in mind that like whenever we have the creatine phosphate energy system, in order to replenish the ATP we used, it doesn't mean that other two energy systems are off. They are all on all the time, but they have um like the the level of the energy systems differ among different physical activity and exercises. Let's talk about the type of athletes. I'm pretty sure that you are remember and recall from first chapter where we talked about types of athletes. We said we have like beginners, like recreational athletes. We have well-trained athletes, and we have elite athletes. But the athletes can be also categorized into two main types. We have endurance athletes and we have strength and power athletes. So here in the picture, the guy who is running, he is an endurance athlete. And the guy who is doing some like weightlifting, he is a strength and power athlete. And athletes train their energy system. So athletes train the three energy systems. Depending on the intensity of their trains, depending on the duration of their trains, they train different types of energy systems. And in the long run, those athletes, like the energy systems in those athletes have some kind of improvement in those people, in those athletes, again, depending on their intensity and duration of their exercise and physical activity. So we have like for the endurance, we have some subdivisions here, like subcategories of endurance. We have extreme endurance activity. For example, we have ultra marathoners. They are running 100 miles or even further. That's really a lot. 100 miles. These are called extreme endurance athletes. We have long distance swimmers, we have long distance cyclers, like cycling the entire France or swimming the like from New York to Florida. Those are long distance swimmers. These are all endurance athletes. So recall this, remember this point, there are two main types of athletes. Other than the three types we talked about, like recreational, well-trained, and elite athletes. But these are the main, like two main types. We have endurance and strength and power. So here the energy system contribution. So for example, for marathon runners, the athletes use 97% of aerobic. Aerobic is the oxidative phosphorylation. We have 3% anaerobic, which can be creatine phosphate and anaerobic glycolysis. And as you can see, for example, we have 100 meters runners. The percentage of anaerobic energy system increases and aerobic percentages decreases. So based on the intensity and the duration, we have different energy system contribution. Let's answer this. Which of the following is an incorrect statement about energy systems? The energy systems are all working and switched on at the same time. The energy systems operate one at a time. If one is switched on, the others are switched off. One energy system may be predominantly used during a certain activity. Yes, that's correct. The correct answer is B, which is incorrect. The energy systems operate all uh, all the time, and it's not true. It's not correct that if one is switched on, the others are switched off. So let's talk about the first energy system, the creatine phosphate energy system. What is creatine phosphate or CRP? You might see different acronyms for creatine phosphate. Sometimes it's called PC, PCR, and CP. These are all creatine phosphate. Or also it's called phosphocreatine. It's an organic compound and it stores potential energy in its phosphate bonds. Do you know why we call this an organic compound? Because it contains carbon atoms. That's why it's called organic compound. And it stores energy in its phosphate bonds like ATP. ATP also stores potential energy in its phosphate bonds. Creatine phosphate is also a high energy phosphate compound, just like ATP. And it's stored in muscle and other tissues. So we have creatine phosphate in our muscles and other tissues. And it acts as a readily accessible reservoir of energy for the reformation of ATP. So this is a system. Creatine phosphate is an energy system to replenish the ATP when we need it as quickly as possible. And here is the reaction of creatine phosphate. So it joins to ADP, and we have an enzyme here, creatine kinase. By the activity of this enzyme, we get ATP and creatine. So this creatine phosphate replenishes ATP, but we need an enzyme. And as you can see, one molecule of creatine phosphate can replenish just one molecule of ATP. So just one creatine phosphate, we get one ATP replenished. And this enzyme is very important. Creatine kinase is an important enzyme. for the creatine phosphate energy system. So here is another reaction like what we see in the muscles. So again, we have ATP. So when we use our muscles to produce force, the muscle uses the ATP task and we get ADP. And then we have creatine phosphate, which converts the ATP to ATP by giving its phosphate to ATP. So what we have here, after replenishing the ATP, we have creatine without phosphate. So this is very simple reaction which happens. So the energy released from the breakdown of creatine phosphate is used to phosphorylate ADP into ATP. This is what we have in our muscles, and this is what happens. And so when we talk about the creatine phosphate, it's better to know what the creatine is. So creatine is a nitrogen containing chemical compound, and any nitrogen containing compound is also called amine, like amino acids. Why we call them amino acids? Because they contain nitrogen in their chemical structure. That's why we call them amino acid. And here, creatine also contain nitrogen in its structure, so we call it like amine. It's also an amine compound. And it's constructed from amino acids arginine, glycine, and methionine. Again, I would like you to remember and to memorize these three amino acids. We will talk about about the amino acids in later chapters, but here just remember these three amino acids that can be used to create to synthesize creatine. So we need arginine, glycine, and methionine. Creatine can be either consumed in the diet and or is synthesized by the liver and other tissues. So we get creatine through our diet. As you can see from the picture on the right side, the diet we can get creatine, it's fish and beef uh, mainly. These are the main food sources of creatine. Fish and beef, the main food sources, which we can get 1 to 2 grams per day of creatine through diet. And it also can be created by the liver. Liver synthesize also about maybe about 2 grams per day. And we excreted creatine by kidneys, again 2 grams per day. That's excreted 2 grams per day as creatinine. So the kidney converts creatine to creatinine and excrete that. And it's about 2 grams per day. And the creatine in blood can also be uptake by muscle to create creatine phosphate for future use. And the creatine supplement, um, it contains like 3 to 5 grams of creatine per day for those who are taking creatine supplements. And the creatine monohydrate is a white powdered form of creatine. So when you see some athletes like take some supplements, creatine supplements, it's creatine monohydrate, which is a white powdered form. The creatine phosphate is also very important in high intensity exercise, and we will discuss that here. So creatine, the deficiency is extremely rare for creatine. Why is that? Why do you think the deficiency of creatine it's rare, it's uncommon? That's because we can get it from food. That's why it's rare. Like if someone has malnutrition or undernutrition, they can get creatine deficiency. But remember, we get creatine from food. We also get it from liver. Liver also synthesizes creatine by using three amino acids. So that's why the deficiency is rare. And it can be taken up by skeletal muscle. The creatine, the amount of creatine we have in muscle, 1/3 of creatine is as creatine in muscle mass, and 2/3 is as creatine phosphate. And it's excreted by kidneys as creatinine. It's 2 gram per day. And we need creatine phosphate for high intensity exercise, which is very fast, right? The high intensity exercise, it happens very fast. So creatine phosphate plays a crucial role in high intensity exercise. And creatine phosphate energy system, it doesn't depend on oxygen. That's why it's an aerobic process. It's an aerobic energy system like glycolysis. We don't need oxygen. And as I mentioned, just one molecule of creatine phosphate can rephosphorylate one molecule of ATP into ATP. A normal resting level of total creatine in muscle is around 120 millimole per kilogram of muscle. And with high intensity and short duration exercise, creatine phosphate levels can be reduced to very low levels in as little as 5 to 10 seconds, which we get depletion of creatine phosphate. And the muscle creatine levels do not drop to zero. It is very important to know, just like ATP. You remember from previous chapters, we talked about the ATP concentration. We said the ATP concentration never drops below 70%. And the creatine phosphate, it's just like that. The muscle creatine levels never ever drop to zero. And in depletion state of creatine phosphate, muscle fatigue occurs. So here's a summary of the creatine phosphate energy system. It is a one chemical step, just like here. We have creatine phosphate plus ATP, which leads to creatine plus ATP. So it's just one chemical step. The enzyme is creatine kinase. It's very important to remember this enzyme. It's a very fast reaction because it's just one chemical step, so it's very fast. We get just one ATP per CRP molecule or creatine phosphate molecule. In exercises for like 10-second duration, we use creatine phosphate energy system to replenish ATP. It's anaerobic, which means without oxygen. And the fatigue, like muscle fatigue, is associated with creatine phosphate depletion. And it is a predominant energy system in very high intensity exercise, like strength and power. And the power events like football, basketball, baseball, these are the exercises which use creatine phosphate energy system predominantly for 10 seconds. And we have a term here. It's called the creatine shuttle. It is the process of recovery of creatine phosphate. creatine shuttle is the process of the recovery of the creatine phosphate, and it occurs in mitochondria. It's an oxygen-dependent energy system that produces ATP. So whenever an oxygen-dependent energy system produces ATP, that ATP used to replenish and recover creatine and convert it to creatine phosphate, which can be used for later. And this oxygen-dependent energy system is our last energy system, which is the oxidative phosphorylation. So in order to recover creatine phosphate and in order to have the creatine shuttle, I mean this process, we need the oxidative phosphorylation energy system. And creatine can use this energy to restore creatine to creatine phosphate, and it can take up to 1 to 2 minutes to replenish creatine phosphate. So it happens very fast, just 1 to 2 minutes to replenish creatine phosphate. Let's answer this question. The creatine phosphate system is completely anaerobic, is not completely anaerobic. Yes, the correct answer is B, is not completely anaerobic because in order to recover creatine phosphate, we need oxidative phosphorylation energy system, which is oxygen dependent energy system. So that's why it's not completely anaerobic. But the creatine phosphates reaction itself, the system itself is anaerobic. And we have creatine supplements. It increases muscle creatine and creatine phosphate concentration by around 20%. So that's why some athletes take creatine supplements to replenish the creatine phosphate and the creatine of muscle mass. They consume like 20 to 25 grams per day for over a period of 5 to 6 days, and consuming 3 grams per day over a longer period of time for 1 month. So these are like different dosage of creatine supplements. So some may use 20 to 25 grams per day for 5 to 6 days. But also they can consume 3 grams per day for a longer time, like for 1 month. And based on these studies, it is effective in improving strength performance. So it improves strength performance, not the strength of muscle. And also we can get some weight gain by getting creatine supplement, which has a detrimental effect on the performance of runners. Because runners, they need to be light, not heavy, so they can run really fast. So, like taking creatine supplement can come with weight gain, which has some negative effects on the performance of runners because they are getting heavier and heavier. So, which is a bad thing for them. But overall, it improves strength performance. It also increased the capacity of high intensity training. It improves strength, speed, power over the long term. And it also increased lean body mass. These are all based on the literature. And the creatine supplement, it's if it is within the recommended guideline, it's safe. And it's not associated with muscle cramps, dehydration, kidney damage, sperm count, or sperm mobility, and liver damage. So creatine supplement, it's not associated with these side effects. It can result in gastrointestinal upset or cramps, but not muscle cramps. It's just gastrointestinal cramps. And the supplement dose is typically 3 to 5 grams per day, which is this one for using for a long period of time or 1 month. So that's the typical dosage of creatine supplement. So in this first lesson, we talked about the first energy system, creatine phosphate. In the next lesson, we are gonna talk about the glycolysis and aerobic glycolysis energy system.